November 3rd, 2010, 4:47 a.m. Marcus Holloway notices something wrong with the thermal image on his screen. He's been staring at inferred satellite footage of Otay Mesa for the past 20 minutes. Most of it shows exactly what you'd expect. Warehouses cooling down in the pre-dawn hours, parking lots, roads. Normal heat signatures for a quiet industrial district near the border. But there's one signature that doesn't make sense, a continuous heat pattern underground, moving in a straight line from a warehouse in San Diego toward the Mexican border, then continuing south into Tijuana. 40 feet below the surface, Holloway zooms in. The pattern becomes clearer. Ventilation exhaust, power conduits, active lighting systems, all of it generating heat from deep underground. He's been tracking the Arellano Felix cartel for 3 years. He knows their patterns, their methods, their infrastructure. But this is different. This is a fully operational tunnel over 2,000 feet long, active for months, and nobody knew it existed. Holloway picks up his phone. The task force needs to be assembled. They're going in tomorrow night. What Holloway doesn't know is that the tunnel is already compromised. Someone else has received the same information he's acting on, and in the next 36 hours, 3 engineers will attempt something the DEA never considered possible. The first indication appeared 3 weeks earlier, when a junior analyst reviewing utility consumption data noticed something unusual. A warehouse in Otay Mesa was drawing electrical power at levels that made no sense for its registered operations. The building was supposed to be a basic storage facility, but the numbers told a different story. Round-the-clock consumption, industrial-leveled electrical draw. She flagged it in a routine report. The report sat in a queue for 9 days before anyone looked at it. When it finally reached Holloway's desk, he knew immediately what he was looking at. He requested thermal, satellite imaging of the warehouse and surrounding area. The images arrived just before 5 that Tuesday morning. Holloway opened them on his computer. The warehouse appeared as a bright spot on the thermal map, standard for a building with active power systems. But then he saw the secondary signature, faint but unmistakable, linear, extending underground from the building directly toward the border fence. He enhanced the image. The heat pattern continued past the border, kept going south into Mexican territory. The signature was consistent with active ventilation systems pulling air through underground passages, temperature regulation equipment, power distribution networks running along a fixed route. He ran the energy consumption analysis. Based on the sustained power draw and thermal output, the infrastructure had been operational for at least 6 months, possibly longer. At 5:12 a.m., Holloway called his supervisor. They had a tunnel, full operational infrastructure. They needed to move immediately. By mid-morning, authorization for a full task force operation was granted. The briefing took place in the main conference room just after 9:30. 30 people around the table. DEA agents who had worked cartel cases for years. FBI representatives from the San Diego field office. Border Patrol supervisors who knew every inch of the Otay Mesa sector. A liaison officer from Mexican Federal Police who would coordinate operations on the southern side. Holloway stood at the front next to a large projection screen. He put up the satellite images first, then the power consumption graphs, then a detailed map showing the suspected tunnel route overlay with property records. The tunnel ran from a warehouse in Tijuana's industrial district to a warehouse in Otay Mesa, San Diego, approximately 2,100 feet, 7 football fields. The entire structure existed underground with no visible entry points on the surface. The Tijuana warehouse had been on a monitoring list for over a year. Known cartel front property, but without probable cause, they couldn't act. The Otay Mesa warehouse was purchased 14 months ago through shell companies, registered in Delaware. Ownership buried under multiple corporate layers. The building had been empty since purchase. A Border Patrol supervisor asked why they hadn't detected the construction. Holloway explained the process. Tunnel construction takes 8 to 12 months. Work happens exclusively at night. Dirt gets removed slowly over many months. Small amounts dispersed across multiple locations. The trucks blend into normal commercial traffic. By the time the tunnel becomes operational, there's nothing left on the surface to detect. Holloway proposed a coordinated binational raid. Mexican federals would enter Tijuana. American agents would enter Otay Mesa. Both teams breached simultaneously at 10 on November 4th. The timing had to be precise. If one side moved early, anyone inside could escape through the opposite exit. Then someone asked about the money. Intelligence reports consistently suggested the Arellano Felix cartel used tunnel infrastructure to move bulk cash, currency from drug sales throughout the United States, transported back to Mexico for laundering. Based on the tunnel's operational timeline, there could be millions stored inside. The room reacted immediately. This wasn't just a smuggling bust. This was a financial disruption. Take the tunnel and the cash, and the cartel loses both its primary route and its operating capital in one night. Holloway's final instruction was clear. No information leaves this room. If the cartel gets any indication that law enforcement knows about this tunnel, they will empty it within hours. The meeting ended just after 11. What nobody in that room knew was that the leak had already happened. Cartel tunnels are not crude holes in the ground. They are sophisticated infrastructure projects that cost millions of dollars and require specialized technical expertise to construct and maintain. The first truly sophisticated tunnel was discovered in 1993. It ran from Tijuana to San Isidro with concrete walls, professional lighting, and ventilation systems. The DEA had never seen anything like it. Since then, over 200 tunnels have been found along the border. Most are crude and unstable. Hand-dug passages that collapse after a few uses, but some are different. The advanced tunnels are built by professionals, former mining engineers who understand underground structural integrity, construction specialists who know how to excavate without leaving traces, electricians who can install power systems that don't trigger alerts. These men get paid $50,000 per tunnel. For workers earning $15 an hour in construction jobs, this represents years of income, enough to fundamentally change their lives. The Arellano Felix cartel has built at least 12 known tunnels since 2004. 6 have been discovered. The other 6 remain suspected, but never confirmed. The Otay Mesa Tunnel is one of the sophisticated ones. The tunnel stretches 2,100 feet from entry to exit. It begins beneath a warehouse in Tijuana and ends beneath a warehouse in Otay Mesa. Entry and exit points are concealed inside false floors. Hydraulic lift systems lower personnel and cargo 40 feet straight down. The tunnel itself is 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide. Just enough space for a person to walk upright while pushing a cart. The walls are steel reinforced to prevent collapse. The floor is poured concrete, smooth and level. LED lights are installed every 50 feet, providing consistent illumination throughout. Ventilation shafts run every 100 meters, pulling fresh air from concealed surface vents disguised as utility boxes. A rail system runs the complete length. Metal tracks embedded into the concrete. Specially designed carts that carry up to 300 pounds. The carts get pushed manually. No motorized vehicles. Motors create too much noise, too much exhaust, too much risk underground. The tunnel cost $2 million to build. Construction took 8 months. It became operational in May 2010. For 6 months, it functioned exactly as designed. Every 2 weeks, the cartel moved bulk cash through the tunnel following a standardized protocol. Duffel bags filled with currency from distribution points across Southern California would be transported to Otay Mesa using normal commercial vehicles. Once inside the warehouse, the bags would be lowered into the tunnel via hydraulic lift. Workers would load them onto rail carts and push them 2,100 feet to Tijuana. The bags would then be raised to the surface and driven to counting houses. The system eliminated every major risk. No border checkpoints, no customs declarations, no drug dogs, no paper trail. Just a simple underground transfer from one building to another. But in early September, something changed. The cartel's financial operations experienced an unexpected backlog. Internal accounting reviews took longer than anticipated. Cash processing systems were delayed. Shipments started getting postponed, rescheduled, delayed again. The cash began to accumulate. By late October, 6 full months of methamphetamine proceeds were stored in the tunnel, sitting in the darkness, waiting. 12 duffel bags stacked against the wall near the midpoint. Approximately 480 pounds of currency, $22 million in cash. 3 men were responsible for maintaining the tunnel infrastructure. Diego Vargas, 34 years old, ventilation specialist. He lived in Tijuana with his mother and younger sister. Before working for the cartel, Diego had installed HVAC systems in commercial buildings. He understood airflow, pressure systems, how to keep air circulating in confined spaces. The cartel recruited him in 2009 to design the tunnel's ventilation system. They paid him $50,000 for the work. After construction, they kept him on monthly retainer to perform maintenance checks. Hector Ruiz, 29, years old rail system technician. He lived in San Diego, originally from Mexicali. Before the tunnel work, Hector had worked in operations in Sonora. He understood underground rail systems, track alignment, load distribution. The cartel hired him to install and maintain the tunnel's rails. He checked them weekly, replaced worn sections, kept the carts functional. Luis Medina, 41 years old, surface logistics coordinator. He handled vehicle coordination on the Tijuana side, made sure trucks arrived on schedule, ensured cargo got loaded efficiently. He had worked for the cartel in various capacities since 2003. Started as a driver, moved up to logistics, earned trust through years of reliable service. The 3 men didn't socialize outside work. They rarely spoke except when coordinating operations. But over 8 months of working together underground, they developed a functional relationship. They understood each other's responsibilities, they knew each other's schedules, and they saw what the cartel moved through the tunnel week after week. They saw the money, 12 bags stacked against the wall, just sitting there week after week, not moving, just accumulating. At some point during those months, they started having conversations, quiet conversations, hypothetical at first. What would happen if the money disappeared? Where would it go? Who would be blamed? The conversations became less hypothetical over time. November 3rd, 2010 at 6:15 a.m. Diego's phone rang while he was still in bed, barely awake. He answered without looking at the screen. Didn't recognize the number. The voice on the other end was distorted, electronically altered to mask any identifying characteristics. The caller spoke in Spanish. The message was brief and direct. The DEA had found the tunnel. They were planning a raid. Tomorrow night, both sides simultaneously. Then the line went dead. Diego sat on the edge of his bed holding the phone. His hands were shaking. The coffee on his nightstand sat untouched, getting cold. His first thought was that someone inside law enforcement had leaked operational information. That meant the DEA's security had failed. That meant the tip was credible, real, actionable. His second thought was that he had exactly 36 hours before the tunnel was raided and permanently shut down. Diego sat there for several minutes considering his options. The safe choice was obvious. Call his cartel contact immediately. Warn them about the raid. Let them evacuate the money and abandon the tunnel. The cartel would reward him. Probably with cash, definitely with continued employment. He would keep his job, keep his income, keep breathing. The second option was to do nothing. Just let the raid happen. But that offered nothing except risk. The cartel might blame him for not knowing, for not warning them. His income would disappear either way. But there was a third option. One that Diego had been thinking about for months. One that had seemed impossible until this exact moment. Diego picked up his phone and called Hector. The call lasted exactly 18 seconds. He spoke carefully, didn't say anything specific. Just told Hector that the DEA was hitting the tunnel tomorrow night at 10. That they needed to meet in person, 2 hours. He gave a location and ended the call. Then he called Luis. 22 seconds, same message, DEA raid tomorrow night. They needed to talk, in person, 2 hours. Diego got dressed, left his apartment, drove to a parking lot near the Tijuana airport, far enough from anywhere he normally went. Somewhere with enough activity that 3 men sitting in a car wouldn't attract attention. 2 hours later, all 3 men sat in Diego's car, windows rolled up, radio turned off, engine running for air conditioning, but nothing else. Diego repeated what the anonymous caller had told him. The DEA had discovered the tunnel. They were planning a coordinated raid. Tomorrow night at 10, both the Tijuana and San Diego sides would be hit simultaneously. Federal agents, Mexican federals, full tactical teams. Hector asked who had called him. Diego said he didn't know. The number was encrypted or spoofed. The voice was electronically distorted. But the information was extremely specific. Not vague intelligence, exact timing, exact operation. That level of detail meant the source had direct access to DEA operational planning. The tip was credible. Luis asked why someone would warn them. Diego said he didn't have an answer. Maybe the caller expected them to warn the cartel. Maybe the caller wanted the cartel to know for some reason. Maybe it was a rival cartel feeding information. Maybe it was someone inside law enforcement with their own agenda. It didn't matter. What mattered was that the tunnel would be raided in 36 hours, and after that it would be permanently sealed. Hector said they should warn the cartel immediately. That was the logical choice, the safe choice. Diego agreed. But then he presented the alternative. The money was sitting in the tunnel right now. $22 million in 12 duffel bags. If they moved it themselves before the raid, the cartel would assume the DEA seized it during the operation. The DEA would assume the cartel evacuated it before they arrived. Neither side would know that a third party was involved. Neither side would be looking for 3 engineers who were supposed to be on their side. Luis asked how they would even move that much money in time. Diego said he had been thinking about this exact scenario for months. He knew the cartel's security schedule, knew when guards rotated shifts, knew when the tunnel was least monitored. There was a window every night between 8 and midnight when the tunnel was assumed to be secure and inactive. Guards stayed on the surface. Nobody went down unless there was a specific reason. The window they needed was between 8 and 9:45 p.m. on November 4th. After 8, the cartel would assume the tunnel was quiet for the night. Before 9:45, they needed to be completely finished and gone because the DEA would breach at exactly 10. That gave them 1 hour and 45 minutes. Hector did the math out loud. 12 duffel bags. Approximately 480 pounds total. They could load 2 bags per cart. That meant 6 trips through the tunnel. If each trip took 15 minutes, they could move everything in 90 minutes. It was tight, but possible. Luis pointed out all the risks. The cartel had guards stationed at both entrances. If any guard decided to come down and check on something, the entire operation would collapse instantly. If they took too long and were still inside when the DEA arrived, they would be arrested and face federal charges. If they got caught by the cartel at any point, they wouldn't be arrested. They would be killed, probably tortured first. Made into an example, Diego acknowledged every single risk. Then he said the number again. $22 million, split 3 ways. That was $7.3 million each. The car was completely silent for 30 seconds. Hector spoke first. His voice was quiet but steady. If we do this, we have to disappear. Permanently, we can never come back. Not to San Diego, not to Tijuana, not to anywhere in Mexico or the United States. We disappear completely, and we never contact anyone from our previous lives ever again. Diego nodded. He had already thought through all of that. Luis asked the practical question. Where would they take the money immediately after moving it? They couldn't just drive around with 12 duffel bags in a truck. They needed a secure location where the money could sit safely while they made arrangements to disappear. Luis said he knew a storage facility in Chula Vista, one of the older ones. The kind that doesn't have modern security systems. No cameras in certain sections. He could rent a unit under a fake name. Pay cash for 3 months up front. The clerks at these places never check identification carefully. They just want the money. Ground floor with direct drive-up access. They could load the bags directly from the truck into the unit. Lock it. Walk away. Come back when they were ready to move the money to its final destination. Diego asked the question directly. Are we doing this? Hector said yes. Luis said yes. They had 36 hours to prepare. The plan they developed was straightforward by necessity. Complicated plans have more failure points. November 4th, 8. Diego would enter the tunnel from the Tijuana side using his normal routine. Scheduled ventilation inspection. The guards knew him, saw him go down regularly. They wouldn't question it, wouldn't follow him. Guards never liked going into the tunnels. At 8:15 p.m., Hector would enter from the San Diego side, also routine, scheduled rail system inspection. He went down regularly to check track alignment. Completely normal. Nothing that would attract attention. They would meet at marker 7, the tunnel's midpoint, where the money was stored. They would load 2 duffel bags onto a rail cart. Diego would push the cart toward the San Diego exit. Hector would walk ahead with a flashlight. When they reached the San Diego end, they would load the bags onto the hydraulic lift platform and send them to the surface. Luis would be waiting with a truck. He would grab the bags, load them, and close the doors immediately. No conversation, no radio communication. Any transmission could potentially be intercepted. Then Diego and Hector would return to marker 7 and repeat the process. 6 trips total. 12 bags. By 9:45 p.m., all the money would be out of the tunnel and secured in Luis' truck. Luis would drive directly to the storage unit, lock everything inside, return the truck to the rental company, disappear. Meanwhile, Diego and Hector would clean the tunnel, make sure nothing was left behind, wipe down surfaces, check for footprints or drag marks, make everything look undisturbed. Then they would exit separately. Diego back to Tijuana, Hector through San Diego. Both would cross the border and disappear before midnight. By 10, when the DEA tactical teams breached both warehouses, the tunnel would be completely empty. The money would be gone, and nobody would know what actually happened. November 4th, 2010. The day of the operation. The morning started with the DEA running its final pre-operation briefing at the San Diego field office. Aloy stood in front of the tactical team. 8 agents, all veterans. All of them had worked major cartel cases before. He walked them through the operational timeline one final time. They would breach the Otay Mesa warehouse at exactly 10 standard entry procedures. Flashbangs to disorient anyone inside. Battering ram on the main entrance. Agents pour through in tactical formation, secure the building first, clear every room. Then locate the tunnel entrance and descend. On the Tijuana side, Mexican federals would execute the exact same procedure at the exact same moment. Both teams would be in constant radio communication. The goal was to trap anyone inside the tunnel between both entry points. No escape roads. Intelligence suggested minimal personnel inside the tunnel. Maybe 2 guards at each entrance for security. Possibly a few workers if operations were happening. But the cartel generally didn't keep heavy security on tunnels. Too many people creates too much attention. They should expect to find currency. How much was unknown? Could be hundreds of thousands. Could be several million. Everything would be photographed extensively, counted under supervision, logged according to standard procedures. The briefing ended. Aloy sent an encrypted message to the Mexican Federal's liaison. Confirmed. 22 hours. Simultaneous breach. Response came back quickly. Confirmed. While the DEA was conducting final preparations, 3 engineers were doing exactly the same thing. Diego went to the Tijuana warehouse in the early afternoon. He acted completely normal. Checked in with the guards using his usual manner. Told them he would be back later for routine ventilation inspection. Should take about an hour. The guards barely acknowledged him. One was watching soccer on his phone. The other was eating lunch. Diego walked through the warehouse, checked the hydraulic lift system carefully, tested the controls, made absolutely certain everything was functional. No mechanical failures tonight. He finished his inspection and left. At 4, Diego drove to a bank in central Tijuana. He withdrew $8,000 from his savings account, every dollar he had. He closed the account entirely. The teller asked if everything was all right. Diego said he was moving, relocating for work. She processed the transaction without further questions. Diego returned to his apartment. He packed a single duffel bag, clothes for a week, essential documents, his passport, the cash from the bank. He didn't take photographs, didn't take personal items, nothing that would suggest permanent departure. He wrote a short note to his mother, left it on the kitchen table. The note said he had to go away for work, an emergency project. He would call when he could. He didn't say goodbye in person. Goodbyes invite questions. Questions lead to conversations. Conversations leave trails. At 7:30 p.m., Diego left his apartment for the last time. Hector called in sick to his construction job early that morning. His supervisor was annoyed but didn't push back. Hector rarely missed work. One day wouldn't matter. He drove to a hardware store, bought heavy-duty work gloves, a powerful flashlight, extra batteries, paid cash, didn't use his credit card. Credit cards leave records. He returned to his apartment, packed a backpack, clothes, documents, the $2,000 he had been saving. Not much compared to what was coming, but enough to get started if something went wrong. He looked around his apartment one final time. 2 years here, small, cheap. He wouldn't miss it. Luis's preparation was more complex because his role involved logistics. He drove to Chula Vista and rented storage unit 47, used a fake name, Marco Soto, paid 3 months advance with cash. The clerk barely looked at him, didn't ask for identification, just took the money and handed over the key. Ground floor, direct drive-up access. Perfect. Later that afternoon, Luis picked up a white Ford panel van from a small independent rental lot in South San Diego. The kind of place that doesn't ask many questions, used the same fake name, showed a fake driver's license. The company didn't check carefully. They wanted the deposit. Luis gave them cash. They gave him keys. Luis drove to a gas station, filled the tank completely, checked tire pressure, everything functional, no breakdowns tonight. He parked 2 blocks from the Otay Mesa warehouse, close enough to reach quickly, far enough to avoid attention. Just another commercial vehicle in an industrial area. Luis turned off the engine and waited. The DEA tactical teams assembled in late afternoon. 8 agents in full gear, ballistic vests, helmets with mounted lights, radio systems, battering ram, flashbang grenades, 2 armored vehicles. They departed the field office at 6:30 and drove toward Otay Mesa using routes that avoided direct paths. They parked 3 blocks from the target warehouse. Lights off, engines off. They settled in to wait for 10 minutes. On the Mexican side, federal police units were doing the same, parking near the Tijuana warehouse, getting into position, waiting. Everything was ready. November 4th, 2010 at 8 p.m. Diego arrived at the Tijuana warehouse. He parked in his usual spot, walked to the entrance, checked in with the guards. Ventilation inspection should take about an hour. The guards nodded without really looking. One still watched soccer. The other had moved on to dinner. Diego walked across the warehouse floor to the hydraulic lift location. opened the concealed panel. The lift platform sat 40 feet below. He stepped on and pressed the descent button. The lift descended smoothly, well maintained. Diego reached the bottom and stepped off onto the tunnel floor. The LED lights were on. The ventilation system hummed steadily. Everything appeared completely normal. Diego walked into the tunnel carrying his flashlight, even though the LEDs provided adequate illumination. Radio clipped to his belt. Regular work clothes. Everything had to look routine. He moved slowly, stopping occasionally to check ventilation grates, acting like he was performing his actual job. Making sure that if anyone reviewed anything later, they would see nothing unusual. His radio crackled, static. Then Hector's voice. 2 words. "I'm in." Diego keyed his radio. Copy. Meet at marker 7. Marker 7, the midpoint, where everything would begin. Hector had entered through the San Diego side at 8:15 p.m. The Otay Mesa warehouse was completely empty. No guards. No personnel. No security. The cartel didn't staff this side. Nobody knew the tunnel existed. The warehouse appeared abandoned. That was its security. Hector unlocked the building with his key, closed the door behind him, walked across the empty floor to the hydraulic lift. He opened the concealed panel, activated the lift, descended 40 feet into darkness. At the bottom, he keyed his radio. "I'm in." Diego's response came immediately. "Copy. Meet at marker 7. Hector walked fast. He knew the distance exactly. He'd walked this tunnel hundreds of times over 8 months. Knew every section, every irregularity. The LED lights guided him through the darkness. His footsteps echoed slightly despite trying to move quietly. He reached marker 7. Diego was already there, standing next to 12 duffel bags stacked neatly against the tunnel wall. Hector stopped and stared for a moment. He had seen them before, many times. But this time was different. This time they weren't the cartel's property. This time they belonged to no one. This time they could be taken. Diego unzipped one bag just to confirm. Stacks of currency bundled tightly, 20s, 50s, hundreds. More cash than either of them had ever seen. Diego zipped it closed. Looked at Hector. "Let's move." Trip 1. They loaded 2 duffel bags onto the rail cart. Each bag weighed approximately 40 pounds. The cart handled the weight easily, designed for much heavier loads. Diego positioned himself behind the cart. Hector walked ahead with his flashlight. They moved at a steady, controlled pace. Not too fast. Running would create noise. Sound traveled differently underground, but not too slow either. They had a schedule to keep. A narrow window that was closing with every passing minute. The tunnel was silent except for the constant hum of ventilation and the scraping sound of cartwheels on metal rails. Their breathing, their footsteps on concrete. Nothing else. They reached the San Diego end. At 8:23 p.m., Diego and Hector unloaded both bags, carried them to the hydraulic lift platform, positioned them carefully in the center. Diego pressed the control button. The lift began its slow ascent toward the surface. Louis was waiting above. When the lift reached surface level, Louis opened the concealed panel. He grabbed both duffel bags. Heavy. Awkward. He moved quickly across the warehouse floor to where the truck was parked just outside. Opened the back doors. Loaded both bags inside. Closed the doors. No conversation, no radio communication. Any transmission could potentially be intercepted. The hydraulic lift descended automatically. Diego and Hector grabbed the empty cart and began the return journey to Marker 7. Trip 2. They reached Marker 7. loaded 2 more bags onto the cart. Same procedure. Push toward San Diego. Steady pace. Controlled breathing. The second load reached the surface at 8:37 p.m. Louis was ready. Grabbed both bags. Carried them to the truck. Loaded them with the 4 bags total, 1/3 complete. Diego and Hector returned. Ahead of schedule, everything working. No complications. Trip 3, 2 more bags loaded. The routine was becoming mechanical. Muscle memory taken over, load, push, unload, send up, wait, return. The third load reached the surface at 8:51 p.m. Louis loaded the bags, 6 total, halfway done. Diego and Hector were returning to Marker 7 when Diego's radio crackled. The sound cut through the tunnel silence. It was one of the cartel guards. Surface level. Tijuana side. Voice casual, not suspicious, just checking in. The guard asked if Diego was down there. Diego froze. Hector stopped walking immediately. Diego keyed the radio. Kept his voice completely calm, professional, normal. Told the guard he was checking ventilation in Sector 4. Brief pause. Static. The guard said the boss wanted a status update, asked if everything was good down there. Diego took a slow breath. Told him everything was fine. Should be done in about 20 minutes. The guard acknowledged and the radio went silent. Diego looked at Hector. 20 minutes. He had just told the guard he would be done in 20 minutes. That meant they needed to finish and exit faster than planned. We need to faster. Trip 4. They loaded 2 bags quickly. Pushed the cart faster than before. Not running, but not slow either. The 4th load reached the surface at 9:30 p.m. 8 bags total. Louis was waiting. He loaded them. Sweating now. The bags were heavy. The truck was getting full. Trip 5. Moving efficiently. No wasted motion. No hesitation. The 5th load reached the surface at 9:16 p.m. 10 bags total. Louis loaded them. 2 left. Trip 6. The final 2 bags. Diego and Hector loaded them onto the cart. Pushed it to the San Diego end one last time. The final load reached the surface at 9:28 p.m. Louis grabbed the last 2 bags. Loaded them into the truck. 12 bags. $22 million. All loaded. He closed the truck doors, started the engine, drove away at 9:31 p.m., 29 minutes before the DEA raid. Diego and Hector were still in the tunnel. They walked back to Marker 7 quickly, checked the area where the bags had been stacked, made sure nothing was left behind. No scraps of paper, no torn plastic, no evidence they were here. They walked the length of the tunnel, checked for footprints, drag marks, anything that would indicate recent activity. At the San Diego end, they reset the hydraulic lift, locked the access panel, wiped down surfaces, doorknobs, railings, control buttons, anything they might have touched. By 9:42 p.m., they were done. Hector left through the San Diego warehouse, locked the door behind him, walked to his car parked 2 blocks away, drove away calmly, no speeding, no attention. Diego returned to the Tijuana side, ascended the hydraulic lift, reached the surface. The guards were still there, one watching soccer, one eating. Diego walked past them, told them ventilation was good. See you next week. The guards didn't respond, didn't even look up. Diego left the warehouse, got in his car, drove toward the border crossing. At 9:55 p.m., Diego crossed into the United States. The border agent checked his passport, asked routine questions about his visit. Diego answered calmly. Told the agent he worked maintenance for a company with facilities on both sides. Completely normal. The agent looked at his documents, looked at his face, waved him through. Diego drove south toward San Diego, then east toward the desert, toward nothing, toward disappearance. November 4th, 2010. At 10 p.m., the DEA tactical team breached the Otay Mesa warehouse. Flashbangs detonated with sharp cracks that echoed through the empty building. The front door shattered under the impact of the battering ram. 8 agents poured inside within seconds, weapons drawn. Tactical lights cutting through darkness, shouting commands into emptiness. The warehouse was empty. Agents moved through, the building room by room. Storage areas, offices, nothing, no personnel, no resistance, no signs of recent activity. They found the hydraulic lift, the feet underground. They entered the tunnel with weapons ready, tactical lights illuminating steel-reinforced walls and concrete floors. LED lights still functioning. Ventilation still humming. They expected resistance. They found nothing. The tunnel was empty. No workers, no guards, no product, no people at all. Agents walked the entire 2,100 feet, checked every section, looked for hidden compartments, storage areas, anything. At 10:47 p.m., an agent radioed Holloway, who was positioned outside the warehouse. Tunnel is clear, no contraband located, no personnel encountered. Holloway stood outside processing the information. He told them to search again. There has to be something. The agents searched for another hour. They found tool marks on the walls, fresh scrapes on the rail tracks, dust patterns on the floor suggesting something heavy had been moved recently. But no drugs, no money, no evidence of what that something was. On the Tijuana side, Mexican federals breached simultaneously at 10. They encountered 2 guards. Both surrendered without resistance. Hands up, no weapons drawn. They were arrested immediately, handcuffed, separated for questioning. The federals searched the building thoroughly, found the hydraulic lift, descended into the tunnel. They found the same thing the Americans found. Nothing. The tunnel was operational, lights working, ventilation running, infrastructure intact, but completely empty. They searched for 2 hours, found the same evidence the DEA found, signs of recent activity, but no contraband. November 5th, 2010, 1 a.m. Holloway stood in the middle of the tunnel, 40 feet underground between 2 countries. Trying to understand what happened, an agent approached him, told him they found cart tracks, fresh ones, made within the last few hours based on dust, displacement patterns. Holloway examined the tracks carefully, clear impressions in the fine dust that had accumulated on the concrete. The pattern told the story. Heavy loads moved toward San Diego, empty carts returning toward Tijuana, heavy loads again. The cycle repeated multiple times. They moved something out of here, something heavy. The agent agreed. But when? They had maintained surveillance on the area for 2 days. No unusual vehicle activity, no large-scale movements. Nothing that would indicate an evacuation. Another agent radioed from the Tijuana side. Mexican police had interrogated the 2 guards. Both claimed they saw nothing unusual. Said the tunnel was empty when their shift started at 8. No workers entered during their watch. No vehicles came or went. Either they were lying or they genuinely didn't know. Holloway processed this information, so whatever was here got moved before 8. But the raid was supposed to be secret. Maximum operational security. How did the cartel know to evacuate before 8 if they didn't know about the raid? Unless they didn't know about the raid? Unless someone else moved it? Holloway called his supervisor, told him they had a problem, a significant one. November 5th, 2010, morning. Holloway submitted his preliminary report. Tunnel discovered and secured. No contraband recovered. No arrests made on American side. Evidence suggests recent evacuation of materials. Possible intelligence leak under investigation. His supervisor read the report carefully. Asked the obvious question. Intelligence leak to who? The cartel? Holloway said he didn't know. Cartel was the logical assumption. But if the cartel knew about the raid, why leave the tunnel completely intact? Why not collapse it? Destroy the evidence? Standard cartel procedure when a tunnel is compromised is to blow the entrances, bury everything. But this tunnel was left operational. The supervisor asked about witnesses. Mexican police had arrested 2 guards on the Tijuana side. Both claimed they saw nothing. No workers, no vehicles, no activity. They were either lying to protect themselves or they genuinely didn't know what happened. The supervisor asked about the cart tracks. Forensic analysis suggested the tracks were less than 6 hours old. Something heavy was moved through the tunnel between 8 and 10 on November 4th, right before the raid. Possibly right up until minutes before the breach. The supervisor was silent for a moment, then asked the question directly. Do you think someone robbed the cartel? Holloway said it was possible. But there was no evidence to support it, no witnesses, no missing money reported because the cartel would never admit the money existed in the first place. No way to investigate a theft that officially never happened. The supervisor made a decision. Write it up as a successful operation. Tunnel shut down. Major smuggling route disrupted. We'll investigate the potential leak through internal channels, but publicly, this is a win. The conversation ended. Later that day, the DEA issued a press release. Federal agents and Mexican authorities conducted a coordinated operation, resulting in the discovery and closure of a sophisticated cross-border tunnel in Otay Mesa. The tunnel, extending over 2,000 feet, was equipped with advanced ventilation, lighting, and rail systems. No contraband was seized at the time of the raid. The investigation is ongoing. The press release didn't mention money, didn't mention a possible theft, didn't mention 3 engineers. The tunnel story appeared in local news for 2 days. A few paragraphs about cross-border smuggling operations, then it disappeared from coverage entirely. Another tunnel discovered. Another investigation closed. The public moved on. The same morning the DEA was filing reports, the Arellano Felix cartel discovered 2 things almost simultaneously. First, their tunnel had been raided by federal law enforcement. Second, $22 million was missing. $22 million that had been sitting in the tunnel just days before. Gone. The cartel boss asked one question. Who knew about the raid in advance? The answer came back quickly. Mexican police had known, American DEA had known, and 3 engineers who maintained the tunnel had access and knowledge of its operations. By the next day, the cartel started looking for the engineers. Diego Vargas, last seen crossing into the United States at the San Isidro border crossing at 9:55 p.m. on November 4th. Border camera footage confirmed this. Security recordings showed him answering questions calmly, showing documents being waved through. After that, nothing. No credit card transactions, no phone calls, no social media activity, no contact with family, no contact with known associates. He vanished completely. Hector Ruiz, his apartment in San Diego was found empty. Lease paid through the end of the month, but all personal belongings were gone. His construction job reported he had called in sick on November 4th and never returned. His phone went straight to voicemail. No response to any attempts at contact. He vanished completely. Luis Medina. His truck was found abandoned in a shopping center parking lot in Chula Vista 2 days after the raid. Wiped completely clean. No fingerprints, no DNA, no trace evidence. His rented house in Tijuana was found empty. Landlord said he had left without notice, no forwarding address, no explanation. He vanished completely. 3 engineers. $22 million. All vanished within 24 hours. The cartel sent people to look for them, offered substantial rewards for information, threatened family members, pressured known associates. But nobody talked because nobody knew anything. The families genuinely had no idea where they went. The associates had no information to give. The 3 men had disappeared so completely it was as if they had never existed. In the years since, investigators have developed 3 primary theories about what happened to Diego Vargas, Hector Ruiz, and Luis Medina. Theory 1. They fled to Central America, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, countries with weak extradition treaties and easy access to false documentation. $7 million per person provides enough resources to live comfortably for decades in these regions, pay the right officials, purchase the right documents, disappear into expatriate communities, where nobody asks uncomfortable questions about your past. Some investigators believe this is the likely scenario. The logistics make sense. The timing fits. Central America has long been where people go when they need to vanish from cartels or law enforcement. The infrastructure exists. The corruption exists. The anonymity exists. Theory 2. They're dead. The cartel found them, killed them, buried the bodies somewhere in the Sonoran Desert where they'll never be discovered. The money was recovered and nobody will ever admit it existed. This theory has supporters within both DEA and Mexican law enforcement circles. The Arellano Felix cartel has resources, informants throughout the region, family members who can be pressured for information. $22 million is not the kind of loss that gets forgotten or forgiven. But there's a significant problem with this theory. Cartels typically make examples. Bodies get found in public places. Messages get sent. The complete silence suggests either the cartel never found them or something else entirely happened. Theory 3. They're living quiet lives under assumed identities. $7.3 million each. Not enough to live like narco kingpins, but more than enough to disappear forever if managed carefully. Paraguay, Uruguay, Argentina, Thailand, Philippines, Portugal. Countries where banking privacy still exists to some degree, where expatriate communities blend into local populations, where asking too many questions about someone's past is considered impolite. The key to this theory is restraint. Don't buy mansions. Don't drive exotic cars. Don't flash money around. Live like a comfortably retired professional. Work a small job for appearances. Keep cash distributed across multiple accounts under different names. Never contact anyone from your previous life under any circumstances. If Diego, Hector, and Luis followed these rules perfectly, they could still be alive today, living in some quiet town, watching news stories about the tunnel from half a world away, knowing they pulled off something that nobody even fully understands happened. The truth is that no bodies have ever been found. No arrests have ever been made. No money has ever surfaced in any traceable way. The DEA officially closed the case as a successful tunnel interdiction operation. From their institutional perspective, they accomplished the mission. They shut down a major smuggling route. That's what gets recorded in the statistics. That's what gets reported to Congress. The Arellano, Felix Cartel never publicly acknowledged the loss. Admitting that $22 million was stolen from directly under their control would demonstrate weakness. In the cartel world, perceived weakness is often fatal. Better to absorb the loss silently than admit it happened. But internally, the loss changed operational procedures. The cartel became significantly more paranoid about tunnel security. They started using different personnel for different operations, shorter operational windows, more frequent cash movements, fewer people with complete information. They never built another tunnel in the Otomea corridor. The investigation into the intelligence leak went nowhere. The DEA's Internal Affairs Division interviewed everyone who had any knowledge of the raid. They checked phone records, email logs, travel patterns, financial transactions, found nothing conclusive. The encrypted phone call to Diego Vargas was never traced. The technology used was sophisticated enough to defeat standard law enforcement tracking capabilities. The number was routed through multiple countries using proxy systems. Dead end. Some investigators suspected the leak came from the Mexican side. Federal police with cartel connections, but they couldn't prove it. The Mexican government denied any security breach. The investigation was quietly closed after 6 months. The official conclusion stated that operational security had been maintained. The tunnel was simply evacuated as a precautionary measure by the cartel in response to increased law enforcement presence in the area. Standard defensive procedure. This conclusion satisfied everyone who needed to be satisfied. The case was closed. But Holloway knew something else happened that night. The timeline didn't fit. The evidence didn't match the official narrative. But without proof, without witnesses, without bodies or money, there was nothing to investigate. Just suspicions, just questions that would never be answered. The tunnel itself was permanently sealed in 2011. Both entrances were filled with reinforced concrete. Multiple pours to ensure complete closure. The warehouses on both sides were eventually demolished. The land was sold to different owners. Nothing visible remains on the surface to indicate what once existed 40 feet below, but the tunnel is still there. Steel reinforced walls, concrete floors, LED lights that no longer function, rail tracks that no longer carry anything, ventilation shafts that no longer circulate air. A monument to criminal engineering, to ambition, to the night when 3 men decided to rob the people who hired them. The tunnel sits in complete darkness now, silent, forgotten, but the structure remains intact. Will remain intact for decades, possibly centuries. A perfect crime scene for a crime that officially never happened. If Diego Vargas, Hector Ruiz, and Luis Medina are still alive somewhere in the world, they are the only 3 people who know exactly what happened on November 4th, 2010. They know how close they came to being caught. They know how many things could have gone wrong. They know what it feels like to steal $22 million from one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the world and get away with it, if they're still alive to remember it.